If you're a beginning watercolor artist and you're not sure what to paint, I like to recommend birds. They have simple shapes, bright colors, and loads of charm. For my final painting in this little bird series, I'll show you step by step how to draw and paint this chickadee. To start out, I want to protect what I've already painted, and so I'm going to just take some paper towel and cover up those areas. And then I'll just place my palette on top so you guys can see the colors I'm using. I'll do one more sheet of paper to protect our goldfinch. And then I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so the main colors I'm using for my chickadee are going to be indigo. On my palette, that's this really dark color right here. And I'll be using a little bit of ultramarine, that's this blue, and probably a tiny bit of burnt umber, which is this dark brown right here. And I'll let you know, obviously, if I use any different ones. But those are all by Daniel Smith. It's my favorite paint. Just pull that down. Okay, in my reference photo, this little chickadee is really, really sweet. He's puffy and cute, one of my very favorite songbirds, and he's kind of looking downward from his branch. So to start out with the drawing, I have to make sure that I have enough room on my little piece of paper here for his tail and his beak. So I always start by doing little tick marks just to figure out where I want those extremities to be located on my paper and to make sure I have enough room for those. And so if I put the tip of the beak right here and the tail feathers about right here, I have to make sure everything I fill in the middle is about the right size, proportionate to those tick marks. So the curve of the head comes up quite high. And this big curve here, all the way to the tip of the tail, are about the same length from here to here and here to here. And then about halfway from here to the tip of the tail comes the back wing, where it intersects with the tail, like so. And if the tail fades out and off the paper a little bit, that's okay. I want my bird to look just expressive and perky. Just always checking to see what angles everything is at. Got a little patch of black beneath his beak here that I'm indicating with my pencil. And then just slightly higher than where the beak tip is, the wing begins. Comes forward a little more than that, actually. We're not going to paint every single little feather detail. This is a small, simple little bird. We just want it to look illustrative and just give the impression of life and fluffiness. Okay, the belly is quite large. Make sure we're coming down far enough for that. And the feet are right about here, curving around a little branch. Don't go too dark with your pencil markings. They're just there to guide you for when you put your paint on. And I think I may have gone a little too fat with the belly. Let's just adjust that slightly. Bring it up just a little bit. Don't start with the paint until you're happy with your drawing. Because if the drawing isn't right, just jumping in with the paint won't fix it. at least with watercolor. You can kind of fix your drawing if you paint with a more opaque medium like acrylic or oil. But with watercolor, can't really fix it. You can see all the layers underneath, including the pencil. All right, let's put the little eye in. And a highlight right here. And we'll just draw a little branch coming out. Okay, it's not perfect, but I think I'm ready to start. Happy enough with it that we can begin. I'm just going to narrow that wing a little bit. All right, so I'm going to start with some gray tints first. And to make sure everything is blended and soft, I'm going to wet the paper inside of the white areas. Just going to avoid the wings for now because there's some details in there. I just don't want it to all get melded together just yet. So I'm going to start with the belly and wet that all in. Lock that in with water. I'm using my Princeton Neptune size 8 round brush. This is my go-to brush for just anything and everything. It's a really versatile brush you can use for tiny details and for broad washes too. All right, so to make a nice neutral gray, I'm just mixing a little bit of that burnt umber and a little bit of my indigo. If you want it to err on the warmer side, just add more brown. If you want it to be a little more blue, a little more cool, add more blue, add more indigo. And it was still a little dark, so I'm just watering it down as needed to make sure it's a light enough value for the white belly. This area in the front is more in the light, so I won't touch that with the paint at all. But I wanted to make sure it was wet so that some of the paint bleeds into it slightly and it looks just soft and blended. Take a more pigmented gray for this strip of feathers up here. And then with the wet paint on my brush, I can start painting in light gray details along the back wing here. I have another video about a chickadee I painted. If you want to see one that's a little more detailed, a little more rendered, you can check out this video. And let's just paint this in with a light gray. We'll come back with black for more details in a little bit. Taking a touch of that ultramarine, which is a nice warm blue, and I'm going to paint in the top of the beak. And the feet. I see a little more blue in those feet. You can see I'm not going real detailed with the claws, just painting in blocked colors for now. I'm switching to my size 2 Escoda round brush. This is a much smaller tip, you can see, than my size 8 brush, and I use this for the very fine details. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more so you can see that closer. But before I do that, I'm just going to fix this hard edge that formed by wetting it and lifting with paper towel. Wetting it and then gently lifting. To make black, I grabbed some dark indigo and then I mix in burnt umber. And that's what I'm going to use for the chickadee's cap. If the paint isn't moving very well for you, just dip your brush in the water without rinsing it, but just to add a little bit of water to loosen up your paint and get it flowing for you. When I come to the edge of my pencil line here where the black feathers meet the white feathers, I'm going to use the tip of my brush to create these little feather details just along the edge. And slowing down as I carefully paint around the eye. There's a little bit of a highlight just around the rim of the eye, so I'm painting around that and avoiding the highlight in the center of the eye. Those areas will need to go a little darker, but for now, I'm just outlining it so I can preserve my drawing. Don't lose track of what I'm doing. And then using a just quick little swiping motion with the tip of my brush, kind of scrubbing some feathers in underneath the beak. All right, I'm watering that down. And I'm going to add a few more feathers below the white part of the head. Again, if you want a little warmer gray, just add more brown versus the blue in the mixture. I think that's what I love about mixing my own gray, is that I can control how warm or cool it is. Okay, I'm going to fill in this part of the eye with a dark gray. And then along the top of the head, there is a slight highlight on the black, and I'm just going to very gently kind of scrub out some of that paint to lighten it just along the very edge. To do that, I'm just taking a damp brush, and I keep wiping the paint off on my paper towel. Otherwise, you just end up pushing paint around instead of removing it. And I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but I'm lightening the top just along there. And then scrubbing a little bit so it looks fuzzy. Okay, just darkening slightly along the ridge here. And then all we need to do is firm up the details in the wings and the feet, and then we can add some background. So taking that same mixture of burnt umber and indigo, mixing up just a little bit more. You also want to make sure you have enough paint. And we're going to just paint in some black details on the wings. Dip my brush in the water to loosen the paint. Just going to be carefully pulling my brush back in these straight lines, avoiding little highlights in between. It's okay if it's not perfect or doesn't look exactly like the photo. I'm taking a slightly warmer version of my gray, a little more brown, and just blocking in a little wash right here. And blending, blending. Okay, the camera's kind of picking up some glare there, but once it's dry, I'll show you what that looks like. Let's paint in just a little bit of a shadow underneath these feet. I'm avoiding the wet paint in the belly for now. I don't want that to blend up in there. We want to make it look like our bird is resting on something solid. And I'm going to make the branch slightly greenish. I'm using this undersea green here. And allowing the texture of the paper to show through. That's called dry brush technique, when you take the wet paint and scrape it across the surface of dry paper. Okay, pretty happy with that. I need to soften the shadow up here slightly. It doesn't quite look like a shadow. It almost looks like it's part of the wing. And then to define the belly shape against the background, I'm going to put a few colors right there. Let's use a little bit of transparent orange. You can see that's the color in my palette. And just put some really light suggestions of color here behind the bird. And then to balance it out, I'm going to put some along the back side of the bird as well. Scrubbing out a hard edge that formed. And darkening that eye up. I think that looks a little more natural. And just darkening the shadow under the bird one more time. I think we're just about done. So let's add a little bit of spatter, a little bit of that transparent orange, just for a fun finished effect. And there's our chickadee. All right, I'm going to pull this away so you can see the 4 finished birds. There are our 4 little songbirds. I hope you enjoyed this series. Let me know if you'd like to see any other birds. Feel free to leave me any comments or questions you have.